This piece of content is brought to you by Micro Center. Check out the links in the description to see all of their best deals during the holiday season, and we'll talk about their deals more later. But for now, let's just get on with the show. Welcome to Broken Silicon, a gaming hardware podcast. I am your host, Tom, and today I am joined by my co-host,
Dan? Maybe?
Are you not sure if you're Dan?
I don't know, man. I forgot my name.
I'm not really sure if I know anymore. There seems to be a lot of people that aren't sure of what's real anymore. We're talking about the allegedly SUV-sized drones flying around New Jersey because, that's what would be easy to hide from the United States radar systems.
And they're very, very politely turning on their navigation lights, too.
Thank you.
Yes. This is definitely a thing that should be getting daily coverage in the news.
Well, yeah, you said that, it was NBC. This has been their lead story for at least a week now. And I'm sorry, I think you're starting to see stuff like this a little bit everywhere. Is that news is slowing down. It's the Christmas season. Maybe just take a breather, report on real news that's there. But, there have been real news stories that have been covered for a week or so. And when you see something like that, and I think I could make similar parallels to way over projected and overhyped, and even just weird stories I'm seeing now on video cards and stuff where it's when you start, I guess I shouldn't say that because these types of stories are always on there if they think it's an interesting do-it-yourself thing. But the more custom-made hardware thing, like a new case for a PS5, this monitor made this laptop, when you start seeing half of the articles on a website or that, it's guys are looking for stories, aren't you? When we're covering a guy's do-it-yourself project.
I mean, listen, some of those are fun, but when we find the particularly interesting one, we even mention it because we just think it's cool. But that doesn't need to be the main story. That's not the main event. That's I'm combing Reddit for the DIY Reddit for to see what people are doing lately.
And I have to say, I didn't plan to talk about this, but you still see this stuff. Someone made a laptop version of the Xbox Series S or the PlayStation 5 Pro, and it's I remember those being much more interesting 1 or 2 gens ago, when it was a portable PS3, 360, PS4, because back then laptops were not as powerful as they are now. And it's oh, look, this person made a portable PS5 and it costs $2,700. I think you could just get a 4080, 4090 laptop, dude. I don't, it's not the same as before where it's there was a reason it was kind of cool when a console was turned into a portable device. And and also because that was before the ubiquity of portable screens. I mean, you can kind of have some of these consoles already without even doing that. Series S isn't that big, but the Series Series S is not big. Series X isn't either. Series X will fit in your backpack with a portable monitor now. Those weren't that ubiquitous, and the consoles.
Those portable monitors aren't really that expensive either. Yeah, I mean, things are more portable now than they used to be. Batteries suck less, or I should say battery life sucks a lot less than it used to.
Well, speaking of portable, the first correction here comes from Crast. It says, a minor correction to the person who wrote in a few weeks ago. Virtual Link USB-C was a proposed standard that never got adopted by the USB forum. It aimed to solve a bandwidth issue in 2018 that is now solved already by just USB 3.2 or certainly USB 4, and a power issue that, again, is now solved by USB PD for power delivery. So technically USB-C ports on a Radeon reference card, I think they had that with at least the 7000, maybe 6000 series. They're not virtual link. That's just what they're called informally. They're just regular USB-C 3.2, same as PSVR. If you want a USB-C port for VR, besides an AMD reference card, I would honestly just suggest getting a powerful gaming PC handheld or a laptop, as those almost always come with fully featured USB-Cs, and they already have a battery, and you could use that with VR in a backpack.
Good advice.
Yeah, it is interesting too, thinking about the future of like VR, which seems to certainly be going through a rough patch right now. But as we get better and better APUs, and it starts to become this thing where like maybe you can get a GPD handheld with 32 gigabytes of RAM and Strix. I would honestly argue like unless you're using the Quest that can be used wirelessly, if you have to use wired, I would actually almost insist on trying to get one of those laptops so you don't have to be tethered to a wire that's going to make you trip over stuff.
Yeah, I mean that does make sense. I never use VR, so I don't really have that good of an intuition for like what makes for a good setup. But I mean, the GPD especially makes some pretty damn powerful handhelds or really small laptops.
Yeah, like what is yeah, they haven't changed it. I mean, I still believe Steam VR's requirements. It says 4 gigabytes of RAM, GTX 970 or R9 290. Like we're still living in this world where they haven't updated that. The new Quest really isn't much stronger than the previous one. I don't know. It's a weird place VR's in where you would think they'd be trying to do more with the more horsepower, but the graphics really aren't changing much. It's just kind of it's almost like someone pressed the pause button on VR until a new AAA game comes out that requires more powerful hardware for VR that sets a new standard, and or there's some Steam VR 2.0. I mean, instead of worrying about like which graphics card can do USB-C, has a USB-C port, I would almost say, look, I know you'll run Half-Life Alyx better on a 4090, but at a certain point, I mean, I think I played that on both my 2060 Max Q and a 3070, and with both I could get pretty acceptable frame rates. And Strix in my test team is getting close to 2060 Max Q performance. So at that point, it's like I think I just go for the portability over worrying if my 4090 has a easy way to hook up to a VR device, don't you think?
Yeah.
Carbon Cry writes in Broken Silicon 287, the guest Daniel Nenny presents the CHIPS Act as a solution to Intel's woes. Now, this narrative is common, but I feel like it ignores the chips could be argued is a cause of some of Intel's actual issues itself. First, it has caused Intel to invest in useless capital-intensive expansionism, and it made Intel believe all is okay with chips money rolling in, et cetera, et cetera. And Intel's more than half of chips. Second, chips was a first shot in an arms race. And as every country did their own CHIPS Act in response, who really is benefiting the most? The guys who have consistently built fabs quick and cheap compared to everyone else, which is TSMC. So TSMC now has enough capacity to fulfill all of the world's organic demand, not forced demand, for leading edge silicon. And chips kind of seems to have killed Intel's volume advantage as it killed Intel's capital reserves, and they're not filling those fabs. I don't know. I'm just not sure this was ever really a solution for Intel's woes. One could argue it was a poison pill. Yeah, that was an interesting one that we touched on with Daniel Nenny in the last episode of Broken Silicon regarding like where CHIPS Act has gone well and where it hasn't. And it's just such a weird thing where you keep seeing this narrative being pushed forward, especially in mainstream non-business oriented news where people are like, well, Intel is being given, whatever the number is, 40, 50, 60 billion dollars. And it's like, no, there's no point where like a monopoly bag of money was just given to Pat Gelsinger. What's going on is it's like, here's money to build more capacity. Capacity wasn't the issue though.
Yeah, I mean, after reading more about the CHIPS Act and all that stuff for the die shrink we did probably a few weeks ago, to my memory, I don't remember exactly when, I did kind of come away with the same takeaway that Carbon Cry had, where you need the infrastructure already, or you need the people to exist for all of this funding to go anywhere. And it just sounds like the US doesn't have the workforce necessary to generate what we have for the chips, or to generate the
certainly not the scale they expected.
To scale up the way they wanted to with the CHIPS Act. And I mean, the CHIPS Act shouldn't have been like a 4-year solution. It's like 5, 10, 15 years planning to get that up and running, because you need to convince more kids to become computer engineers and technicians. And that means you need to go.
Or you need people from other countries, immigrants to come in who actually do those jobs.
Yes. Yeah. You either need to bring in immigrants or hire a bunch of people from Taiwan, or convince a bunch of 18-year-olds to be engineers, and then you'll have that workforce kind of there in 4 years, but you still need like the managerial positions and all that. So I don't know. It's not a 4-year thing. It's like 15 years of building infrastructure to get this to work.
Yeah. No, I don't know. I don't really have much to say. Again, I don't think there's any one thing that's caused all of Intel's issues, but I do think that this is an important correction that needs to be pushed forward more. And I think just accepted more, because I think like Daniel Nenny brought it up, but it's not my job to always push back, but I wish I would have pushed a little harder of like, well, you're saying that they have too much capacity. You're saying this, but you're saying they need chips. Let's stop saying they need the CHIPS Act or they need that to work. We need a new CHIPS Act. And I think he did eventually say that, though. And I think more often we need to start talking that way, because just throwing a big money number on screen without anyone really knowing what that's doing and going towards the right things isn't really helping anybody.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let us now then move on to the first story here with story number 1. Nvidia RTX 5070 Ti specs allegedly leaked. It's an open secret by now that Nvidia's GeForce RTX 5000 series GPUs are on the way, with an early 2025 launch on the cards, pun intended. Now, preliminary data from the RTX 5070 Ti have leaked, revealing an increase in both VRAM and TDP and suggesting that the new upper mid-range GPU will finally address the increased VRAM demands for modern games. According to a leak reported by WCC FTech, the RTX 5070 Ti will have 16 gigabytes of GDDR7 from 12 from the 4070 Ti, as was previously speculated. Also confirming previously, the new source confirmed that the 5070 Ti will use cut-down GB203, something that I heavily suggested. Although the new leak points to a significantly higher TDP, the new memory configuration will supposedly run on 256 plus. Well, of course, it's 16 gigabytes. Yeah. And it also will supposedly receive a bump in CUDA cores from 8,448 in the 70 Ti to 8,960 in the 70 Ti. The 70 Ti will also switch to the 12V 2x6 power connector, exclusively leaked by Moore's Law is Dead, by the way. Nvidia is expected to announce the RTX 5000 series cards at CES 2025 in early January, but the 5070 Ti is supposed to be the third card in the series launch cycle. That said, leaks suggest that the 70 Ti should still be able to launch by Q1 2025, meaning we may see an indication of specs at CES, although pricing is still unclear. Yeah, this really jives well with everything that I've leaked. And so I guess, and by the way, I was quoting there from Tech Power Up. I know this is one of those random Twitter leaks, and we can never be 100% sure if it's correct, how correct it is. But at the same time, this really, really lines up with what I've been reporting when I leaked, that the 5090 24 gigabyte for laptops instead of 16, the 5080 16 gigabyte for laptops, suggesting they will actually use a cut down of the top die, well, not the top die, the second tier die for the 5080, whereas the 4080 was just a 4070 Ti, and that if they're doing that, I have to guess that they realize that the 4070 Ti should have always been what they eventually called the 4070 Ti Super. Pricing's up in the air on that one. My suspicion would be $899, but could be $799. I could see it. But yeah, I don't know. What do you think about this, Dan?
I think it mostly looks good. The only thing I'm worried about that you already touched on is, and based on what like Nvidia's been saying in the past, where they're seemingly trying to suggest that like the 5070 Ti is actually their enthusiast card now. I'm a bit nervous they're going to try to push the pricing envelope with this thing and be like $900 or God forbid 1,000. But I'd be pretty surprised if they went full.
I don't think they go
for the full 1,000. But I mean, the 70 Ti class, and I would argue even the 70 should have had 16 gigabytes for a while now. So good job. They finally got there eventually. When it's probably going to be outdated to think that in like 1 or 2 more generations. But hopefully they keep the price point the same as it was last time at like $800 is the best I think we can hope for. And yeah, they finally aren't depriving their quote unquote enthusiast tier graphics card with RAM.
Let me look at this here, because I think when we talk about what should we expect for pricing, I think we should expect Nvidia to be like a little more willing to give more RAM where it's needed, but note the word needed, and that I would still expect them to want higher margins than last gen on every card except maybe the very mid-range and low end where there's more competition. If Battlemage keeps being supplied, and certainly from RDNA 4. So by that I mean, when people talk about what they should expect out of pricing, when I look, and I just pulled up some chart on video cards here, and when I look at the 5090, for example, that should use GB202, I'm 512-bit bus, like what is it going up to, like 25,000 CUDA cores?
Mm-hmm.
No, I don't think they'll charge 1,600. I mean, good Lord. They would not surprise me if they went to $3,000 like Titan Volta. I mean, after all, Titan Volta followed Turing when AMD was not competing in the high end. A repeat of what happened with Titan Volta and Titan RTX that was $2,500.
Yeah.
Really would not surprise me. I mean, we're talking about a die 20% bigger, at least, I guess, 20% more RAM, if not a third more RAM, because who knows, they give you the full 32 gigabytes for sure. And with that in mind, I'd be very surprised if that wasn't a 2,000 or more.
Yeah, and more they are just going into the 90 is not a gaming card anymore. It's for people that play games and work on their computer.
But so, okay, that's there. Let's go down the stack then. All right, but then I look at the 203 die, 256-bit, 96 SMs. All right, but so I think, what is that then? 96. Right, so we're looking at something, if it is that many SMs, at a minimum, we seem to be looking at something around the CUDA core count of the 4080, and certainly it would use more expensive RAM because it's GDDR7, but I can't imagine it's that much more. And from that perspective, I go, yeah, so look, I could see if a cut down version of one of Lovelace's 03 die went to 800 eventually. Why couldn't a cut down version of this 03 die go down to that? And same and so forth, with 205 seemingly being actually maybe smaller than 104. I don't know, maybe 500 or maybe a $600 5070 isn't crazy at all. There would probably increase margins if it was the same price as the previous thing. So yeah, I mean, that's where I'm looking at with this. And I would suggest that this would make it perform. Yeah, I mean, look, probably 15-20% faster than the 4070 Ti Super. And if it was $800, they could go, yeah, look, 20% increase in price performance, and it has enough RAM from the get-go. Although it is interesting, I of course also leaked that the 5070 is definitely going to be announced. With some sources have only heard about a 12 gigabyte 5070, haven't heard about the 70 Ti. Now, is this wires crossed? Are they sometimes talking about the same thing and missing this? It's possible, but I don't know much else I really have to say. But like, none of this really surprises me. I think it was worth reporting on this because of that. I wouldn't expect this for less than $800 though, guys, and frankly, $900 wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, I mean, this is getting closer to where they're actually competing with AMD, although this will still probably be stronger than the 8800 XT or whatever they call that. But once you're at this tier of performance, they do have to be more competitive than where they've just completely run away with the market at the top end next generation. So we can hope they'll be quote unquote competitively priced at $800.
Yeah. But again, it'll be interesting to see how good RDNA 4 is, because there's been recent rumors, and look, they're rumors. Certainly, it's not something I can say is 100%. Like, you should add this on top of mine or something. But the recent rumors on RDNA 4 performance is on the upper end of what I leaked, suggesting it could just straight up be a 4080 Super. And if they were to feel the need to be aggressive at $500, like I think they might because of Battlemage, then it's like, well, okay, but what is Nvidia? Are they really going to put a $900 card? I mean, I said it was, 10-20% faster than the 4070 Ti Super. So what? It's a 4080 Super. If AMD has a card even within 10% of that performance for $500, even $600, I don't think they can get away with 900. So that will, or maybe they think they can. I don't know. We'll have to find out.
Well, we'll see. I don't think they'll be received popularly if they do, but
yeah. All right. Let us now move on to story number 2. Intel CEO Pat Gelsinger forced out after board loses confidence in turnaround plan. Quoting here from Reuters, Gelsinger, who resigned on December 1st, left after a board meeting last week during which directors felt Gelsinger's costly and ambitious plan to turn Intel around was not working and the progress of change was not fast enough, according to a person familiar with the matter. The board told Gelsinger he could retire or be removed, and he chose to step down, according to the source. Gelsinger in 2021 inherited a company rife with challenges that he compounded, setting lofty ambitions for manufacturing and AI capabilities among major clients, until ultimately lost or canceled contracts under his watch and was unable to deliver the promised goods, according to a Reuters special report in October. He made optimistic claims about prospective AI chip deals that exceeded Intel's own estimates, leading the company to scrap a recent revenue forecast about a month ago. And Carbon Cry adds a note here. Pat is provisionally replaced by CFO Dave Zinsner, career experience as COO and COO in power semiconductor manufacturers and at Micron, who will handle manufacturing and client computing group. Leader Michelle Holthus at Intel since 1996, works in sales and marketing, will lead product parts of Intel. So 2 CEOs for now as they search for a new one. So there you go. After months of detailing Intel's and Pat's failings and odd decisions, his refirement still has come as a shock given when it happened. And Daniel Nenny agreed on this point. You see, despite what some armchair experts have said on YouTube that this couldn't be foreseen, nobody, Daniel Nenny, an industry veteran of decades, talked to was surprised by this. He wasn't surprised by this. I wasn't surprised by this because of the talks I've had with people behind the scenes for months saying, Pat's gonna go, guys, and certainly some people. I remember the Kit Guru guy and I'm blanking right now. Leo from Kit Guru also said this, was sharing clips on Twitter. Tech Yes City was sharing clips on Twitter. A lot of recent guests on this channel said this guy's gonna go. But all of us, I believe, and Daniel said this too on the last episode, that we thought it would be like in a year, half a year. And so, it happening now is more of a sign of chaos at Intel because it's just right before Christmas. Like, what in the heck? They don't even have the new CEO. I mean, that's what Daniel Nenny said. Why would you get rid of him before you even know who his replacement is? So I don't know. To me, this suggests there was some fight going on where he wanted to double down on some project more and they just got rid of him. But I don't know. What did you think of all of this, Danny? I mean, you agree, right? We thought this would happen, but now I was like,
no, it seems very chaotic to me. I don't know. I just thought it was funny. The first thought I had when I saw this, I just seen Gladiator 2. So I was like, ooh, they've got their Geta and Caracalla to take over now. If you watch the movie, that went pretty well.
Yeah, but it panned out really well for Rome having dual emperors, which there was a time where they were dual emperors. By the way, I looked up. I believe they weren't twins. They were just half brothers or something, but basically the same thing happened. It caused tons of problems.
To put it mildly, Ridley Scott likes playing fast and loose with history. But
yes, but it certainly is entertaining.
But yeah, I mean, I feel bad that like Pat Gelsinger's tenure as CEO seems to have gone so terribly, because when he first got hired as CEO, it kind of looked promising. They were hiring a tech guy with deep roots at Intel to be the CEO. And I remember being excited because it looked like Intel might be righting the ship, but I guess he was very much the wrong person at the time. And I don't know. He just did not pan out like I thought he would, or he could. And obviously, I don't think you can place all of the blame on Pat Gelsinger, but there's enough decision-making that he did that's already seemed to backfire that I think it's fair to say he wasn't that great of a CEO.
Yeah, and one thing that I really resent is, and I'd say we've seen this with a lot of things, people seem to don't remember how good or bad they were in a certain time period, but like this framing of, well, Pat took over a company that was in disarray. I'm pulling up Intel's revenue right now, and I know it's usually like the bad comes after the bad thing actually happened. AMD turns around years after they're actually making successful products because there's that lag of it actually the results coming forward after you succeed or don't succeed. But when people say rife with issues, Intel's best quarter, I believe, might have been in 2021 from what I'm looking at. So the only way to be objective is to just look at the numbers on paper. I'm sorry, Pat took over when Intel was actually at an all-time high. I don't think you can argue he took over a company in complete disarray. It was just a company that had competition. And it's hard for me to not, unless I'm giving you my opinion, not trying to be objective, look at the numbers and go, at the end of the day, he took over and it went straight down. And that has to mean bad decisions were made somewhere.
Well, yeah, the biggest one I think you can point to is they had to do a pretty massive cutback in employees after one of his first big drives was to increase headcount in Intel. So that demonstrably didn't work. Other internal things I'm not so sure about, but yeah, like I think in 2021 the cracks in their technology were starting to show, but that doesn't really break through for a few years, I suppose. And yeah, there were issues with the culture at the company, but he doesn't seem to have done anything to fix them and those issues. And the cultural problem at Intel seems to be the major thing that's killing them.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like Pat took over and he said, what we're not doing is innovating enough. And there's some truth to that. I mean, 5% IPC uplifts every year and a half for 10 years doesn't smell like aggressive innovation to me. But at the end of the day, the real problem was the culture. Obviously, you need to innovate more, but what you needed to do is not get into more markets. It's just stay in the ones you're in, fund them correctly, and cut all the bullshit. Instead, he expanded and then cut the bullshit, and now they don't have money to make any of the things he wanted to.
Yep, and yeah, I don't know. Everything out there, projects are being canceled left and right out there, it seems now, because he pressed the gas when he should have hit the brakes a little bit.
Gary No Sugata writes in terms of unit volume, Intel still massively dominates many computer markets, yet they're struggling to even make a profit. Right. And I know so many people go, dude, have you looked at the latest charts? Intel still has 70, 60, whatever percent market share of this market. And you go, yeah, but if their revenue is similar to AMD in that market, which I believe it is in server, if not below, that's really bad,
yeah,
actually.
That means they're paying to stay up market leader, quote unquote.
Yeah, they're selling twice as many products and not making more money. That's what eventually led to NVIDIA utterly dominating Radeon. Is the only way Radeon was holding on to half or even occasionally a decade ago, 55% of the market share was by selling things for way cheaper than they should have been sold for.
Yep.
Let's see. But with Pat, I'm continuing this question. But with Pat having left, I wonder if people might take Intel's problems more seriously. But looking at the amount of copium for Battlemage, guess not. Can you see any realistic arguments for why Intel might be able to turn things around within a few years? Yes, actually. So I think it just depends what you mean by turning things around. Because I'm sorry, right now, this is how things are going. It isn't bumpy. It's just down. It's going straight down.
Yeah, and I mean, they've even said, but the last earnings report, they said next quarter is going to be worse than this one. So,
yeah. So from my perspective, turning things around is just not going down. It's stopping the bleeding, which we thought they might have with Alder Lake or whatever, and they just didn't seem to. And so I don't know if I can easily see Intel getting back to where they were in five years even. I can see them stopping the bleeding and us not worrying about them anymore. I think they probably need to cut 30% of their workforce. They need to launch something like, when it comes to graphics, Battlemage B580 and nothing else. Don't spend any more money than you need to every 2 years and make it so it's actually making at least a 20% margin. And they need to launch a solid core architecture every 2 years for all of their CPUs, not 3 or 4. They can't afford to make 2-3 times as many architectures as AMD. Now, if someone says, what do you mean 3 architectures? I mean, sources of mine at Intel laughed that they shouldn't have called what Granite Rapids used in server Redwood Cove Plus, because it was basically just a different architecture. So if you think about what's going on, you have Granite Rapids with Redwood Cove Plus, and then over here we have Lion Cove, but 2 versions of it, one for Lunar Lake and one for Arrow Lake. And then over here we have, Skymont Little Cores. No. What you should be doing is one unified architecture like AMD. maybe give it less cash or more sometimes, but that's it. And you use it across your whole stack because they can't afford to do this anymore. So yeah, look, if they were to just make one solid architecture that's always 20% better every 2 years, cut their workforce, make one solid GPU every 2 years, stop pretending they're competing in ultra enthusiasts, stop lying to gamers, even though gamers kind of want to be lied to, it seems. Yeah, I think in 3 years they could stop the bleeding. Why not?
Yeah, they really need to take a page out of AMD's book, where what made AMD dominant again, and whenever AMD needs to regroup, they simplify what they're doing. Instead, Intel has the opposite philosophy, where it's like, well, things are failing. We need to start designing as many things as possible and wasting a ton of money. It's a complete lack of efficiency that, yeah, it's going to kill them at some point if they don't readjust, which I guess the good news is, based on some of the leaks from this channel and probably others I don't really remember right now off the top of my head, but it does seem like those decisions are being made to some extent. So the best thing I can hope for is that our piece of evidence I can offer from my perspective is it does appear that Intel knows that there's an issue finally, and they're internally acknowledging it.
Yeah. Although, again, I don't think it can just stop with Pat. I mean, how has Intel managed to seemingly pick the wrong CEO? Again, besides Bob Swan, who seems to have been the interim keep the lights on guy that they needed at the time. Besides Bob Swan, I would at least argue, seems like they've picked like 3 or 4 bad CEOs in a row. Again, something Daniel Nenny brought up on the last episode. So something needs to happen with the board as well.
Oh, probably. I mean, we'll see if these 2 interim CEOs work out well. That seems like a way to have a lot of infighting, but maybe I'm wrong.
And not unless nobody's making any major decisions. If they're just like, you handle this half, I'll handle this half, and we're just going to try to stay the ship without major changes. But yeah, if major changes happens, that's where the fighting's going to come.
Well, yeah, as interim CEO, that's what they should be doing, you would think. So let's just pray they're not power hungry or going to stab each other in the back or something.
All right, now let us then move on to story number 3. B580 12GB reviewed and launched. Quoting first from PC World and then from Kit Guru, then a little summary. If you're looking, so this is from PC World. If you're looking to play games without breaking the bank, Intel's Arc B580 is a no-brainer. It handles 1440p gaming and style, unlike its rivals, and its 12 gigabytes of memory means you won't need to turn down graphics settings at 1080p in cutting-edge games, something the 8 gigabyte 4060 and 7600 can't achieve. It uses a standard 8-pin as well, can even run even faster in games that support XE super sampling, and a shocker, is actually a reasonable size in an era where GPUs often exhibit Godzilla-like proportions. Perhaps most importantly, the rampant bugs and performance issues that plagued Arc's second gen, are now gone. So that's one review. Here's another review from Kit Guru, who yet reported, during this review period, I've encountered non-stop game crashes in Star Wars Outlaws, hard locks in Cyberpunk 2077 when ray tracing was enabled, which everyone brags about Arc's ray tracing, so inconsistent frame times in F1 2024, in Ghost of Tsushima, woeful ray tracing performance in Black Myth Wukong, alongside performance grinding to a near standstill in Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart. Every frame generation stopped working, and even frame generation stopped working in the only game that currently supports Intel's implementation of the technology. And then if we just pull from a couple other reviews briefly, without directly quoting, seems like I would summarize Gamers Nexus stated a fairly meh to good-ish opinion about Battlemage, despite him, again, running into bugs and crashes he did not get from AMD and Nvidia. And Hardware Unboxed seemed to have gotten lucky and avoided major issues while getting results that were definitely on the more remarkable end of the spectrum. And so overall, you could say that on paper, it looks good, but still, once you holistically look at all reviews, it definitely isn't up to the driver standards of even AMD unless you ignore a lot. And so there you go. The reviews are in, and Battlemage is exactly what this channel leaked in October, close to 7600 XT performance, which, to be clear, Hardware Unboxed and Tech Power-Ups numbers found it to be single digits faster than 7600 XT. I consider that around it. But of course, it is stronger in ray tracing most of the time. And as cemented in a leak a week ago in the Broken Silicon with Daniel Nenny, wow, I've referenced that one a lot, almost exactly 2080 super performance as reported early by this channel. So look, at $250, the B580 is interesting. It is. However, In a throwback to the Ampere years, we seem to have a case of fake MSRPs on our hands that a lot of people don't seem to be willing to report. With B580 sold at $400 often, and with many observers in Europe and China stating on Twitter that the street pricing they're seeing all over the place is way higher than what Intel announced. And you even have major sites in the US like Best Buy, who have not even received Battlemage for sale, and Micro Center receiving an extremely limited number in a handful of stores and almost always above MSRP. So if you can get a B580 for $250, and you're okay with the occasional, but not every game crashing anymore, the occasional crash, it's all right. But the B580 is usually $270 or more. And at that point, when the only argument we can realistically make is for price performance, the second you go to $270, any reasonable person should consider that it is not hard to find a 3060 for less at $260, or a 6750 XT for $280 instead, which is stronger for an extra $10 and won't crash in those games mentioned, or at least that is what I think a good shopping advice is. And no amount of copium will ever make me put clicks and bandwagoning along with Cope over giving you all my honest opinion.
Yeah. I mean, my opinion on this is it's okay. Like, I think if this launched 18 months ago, it would be more interesting.
Oh, sure.
but
easily.
Because, but we're now on the verge of two new generations coming out. There's going to be a realignment in price performance. So
there already kind of is. I can find a 6800 for $340 or same price performance then is this better the second the B580 hits 280, or a 3060, 6750 XTs for within 10% of the price, sometimes cheaper. One of them stronger, one of them's Nvidia if you want DLSS.
I mean, given the option, as this is basically a 7600 or 7600 XT competitor, or it's advertised to be that. Okay, at $250, I can see an argument for why you would get this over a 7600 or 7600 XT, but this is going up to $400 or $400 plus dollars, and also just
especially in China, it seems. By the way,
and also it's just funny to me though, looking at this on Amazon, most of them are saying that you won't even arrive until next year, which is a little funny, but.
Yeah, because for some reason they're being sold from China because no one's buying them in China because they're $400 in China.
Yeah, and they're selling them here on Amazon for $400. Okay, well, if this is a $400 card functionally, then it's no longer a 7600 XT competitor. It's a 7700 XT competitor.
4060 Ti competitor.
4060 Ti competitor. And those look better to me than what they have offered here. And then as far as like the reception is going, both by a lot of the outlets and just comments online, it almost feels like I'm back in 2012 where people just accepted worse performance standards than they do now. Not even talk about resolution and frame rates, but you know how they talked about cards back then. It's like, well, yeah, sometimes graphics drivers just don't work, and you need to shift to a new one. And
like I had a 560 Ti, a GTX 560 Ti. And I don't remember if it was Borderlands or what game, but I just could not get it to work consistently with the newest driver. So I had to use an old one. And I looked online and people were like, oh, that can happen. One guy said I burned a disk with we used to use disks, people, with 4 different NVIDIA drivers that I just quick install when I'm switching between games. And that was just something you kind of put up with back then.
Yeah. And then the weird bugs and crashes in games. Okay. That was more common
just
back then.
The Metro game will not launch.
Yep.
Or better yet, a Fallout game will not launch the first time you try to.
Yep. Garbage frame times in a lot of games. That was the standard back then. And I can't remember which game it was in, but one of the reviewers discussed like the official fix for a bug where the game just doesn't work is Cyberpunk is just like resetting the settings every time you turn on the game. It's like, yeah, that's a great solution. So while I'm glad they're readjusting price performance, it's kind of hollow given all the issues. And I think Gamers Nexus put it well, where they're like, well, instead of like 30 to 40 issues that it had last time, it's only a handful this time. So it's an improvement, I suppose, in that area, but it's just enough issues where I don't know why I would recommend this at the price it's being sold for. But I guess if it's $250, it's okay. Just check which games you play, or and make sure it's not one of the games that this graphics card has issues with. Jesus, because I think we can hope that Intel fixes the drivers eventually and those problems go away. But it's Intel we're talking about at this point. Who knows if they're ever going to fix the drivers?
Mm-hmm. And yeah, I mean, or, if I'm advising one of my friends who doesn't pay attention, doesn't usually update their drivers more often than once a year, like I know, like my friend Lou or something, and he's like, he's a smart guy, he's an engineer, but he is an engineer. He wants to come home and probably play a lot of games that don't need to run at super high settings, but he still likes to play them, and he wants to have a decently new card that's not falling apart, and asked me what's under $300. I don't feel like spending much money on this. Guy updates his drivers once a year. He doesn't want to have to troubleshoot things. Am I really gonna, and I'm just looking at Tech Power Ups 1440p summary, am I gonna say you should get something 9% faster with less RAM than the 7600 XT and like save, $30, because again, this thing isn't really 250? Or should you just get something that I know will work and work longer because it has 16 gigs, not 12 gigs? I don't know. I think a lot of people are weirdly bringing up the 4060. Like, no one said the 4060 was the best price performance card ever. It's like always this thing like, oh, I forgot, we've all been recommending the 4060. There's a lot of weird comments in my recent video, like why a lot of accusing me, if you can believe it, of being an Nvidia fanboy, which nothing makes me laugh more. I guess that's what I am now. I started as AMD, then Intel. Now I'm fully the Nvidia fanboy. It's like I've never really recommended the 4060 ever. So if it's better than that, you're better than something I don't recommend. I'm just going to say, again, I don't know. If it is 250 and nothing else is available, which stock fluctuates, sure, I can see recommending it to someone as long as I let them know it might not run some of the recent games. But I'm going to be much more likely to go, oh, look, I just saw a deal on Amazon for a $280 6750 XT. That's actually 10% faster than this and is pretty much the same price. I mean, no, I'm not going to tell Lou to save $10 for 10% less performance and crash in some games.
Yeah, and I don't know. I guess the more good I aesthetically like the design for the reference card.
Yeah, I think it looks cool.
But that's probably the most positive thing I have to say about it. And then as far as like, does this bode well for Intel, which I don't think so. I mean, it has this card is getting good reception because they're not making money off of it. Like, does this? Mm-hmm. It doesn't suggest.
And I'm told firmly by multiple people. Also, you don't need sources for this. Do the math yourself. They are losing money on each one of these cards sold.
And it's like this doesn't bode well for ARC as a project or a brand. It's chugging. ARC continues to chug along, and hopefully something good comes out of it eventually. But like, I don't know. They made a way bigger card on a more advanced process, and it's barely better than the competition. That's not good.
Right. And I think I think when you look at some of the negative feedback, and look, overwhelming majority of people upvoted the video, gained hundreds of subscribers this week, gained new patrons when it came out. So, I mean, anyone who's like, this is the end of Moore's Law is dead because he's still gaining subscribers. No, we're doing fine. But I think this is just one of those things where, like, sometimes the haters look for the one truth, and then the thought police come out and they go, well, here's our chance to attack Moore's Law is dead because he isn't agreeing with the thought police. And because a lot of the comments were just bizarre, just like, again, bringing up 4060s that I don't recommend, like saying, well, why don't you think? It's like, no, I'm using like Hardware Unbox and Tech Power Ups numbers. Like, I'm quoting them and I'm saying this is a gaming hardware channel. We try to look at things at more than just dollar lower equal good. We go, is this sustainable? Are you able to really buy it for the price they're saying? Is this going to lead to a better product in the future? Do the specs suggest they're getting their stuff together? And there's been products where, like, I could say yes. I mean, Black Lovelace really, really impressed me, and like RDNA 2 really, really impressed me. Intel's integrated graphics used to really impress me. Mm-hmm. Lunar Lakes are all right, but probably more efficient with its space than the dedicated card. Now that I think about it, that might be a good analysis to do at some point. But when I look at this, I go, guys, I mean, I think Tom Peterson, Intel's professional liar, said in an interview, actually, there's more transistors than we reported, but we don't want to talk about them because those are the ones not being really used or something. And it's like, well, so then, yeah, then this thing has a ton more, like maybe double the transistors of what the 7600 has for similar performance. That's just, when I see that, I go, that it's not what Intel says. Intel just fired Pat Gelsinger for not delivering what he said he could deliver. Blindly believing what Intel says is going to happen in the future is actually the best way to know what's not going to happen. Mm-hmm. If you look at what's happened with them.
Enthusiast.
Yeah, ultra enthusiast performance here. What you need to do is think for yourself. Look at the math yourself and go, I don't see how this card that seems like it probably costs $300 or $350 to manufacture is going to be sustainable in the future. Intel can tell me it is, but the math isn't mathing, and the math hasn't mathed for Pat Gelsinger, which would suggest that if you do your own research, you're typically right about Intel compared to what they say. So that's what this channel does. We don't just blindly look at a thing. We go, holistically, is this impressive technologically? It has not impressed me technologically. And I can find better value if I just look for 5 minutes.
Well, Tom, wait until you're wrong when the Steam survey shows that 40% of cards are A580s next year.
Oh, I'm B580s. I know you.
B580s.
We've been doing that a lot and getting mad when we're talking on the phone when we say the wrong one. Jensen Wing writes in, he says, what incredible feat of engineering did Intel do in order to make a GPU launch that is 2 years after Zen 4 with 75% of the density as Zen 4, even though it's using the same node, if not a better PDK from it? More seriously, though, as long as Intel continues to ship silicon with far lower transistor density than its competition, does it really matter how good or bad Intel's performance or power is? Well, the power consumption thing, again, matters more when it will make a difference for you. I didn't think the RX 480 versus 1060 was a big deal. Technologically, the 1060 kind of seemed more impressive, but at the same time, look, 180 watts, 150 watts versus 120 watts, I don't think anyone's going to care about that. So as long as whatever Intel does, whatever Intel releases or any company releases is at the amount of 8 pins you would expect for the tier performance, whatever, RDNA 3 isn't as efficient as Lovelace. Use 2 8 pins, no one cares. No one really cares. No one's going to notice. So that's what I think about power. But does the other stuff matter? I mean, yeah, it really does matter because they can't make them, both because they're not profitable. And if you think about it, I mean, Nvidia can almost make double the cards at the same performance with the same amount of silicon, meaning if they bought the same amount of wafers to compete, Nvidia would have double the market share just by default because they can make more. That's the sort of thing. No, it absolutely does matter. And I don't know how they managed to do this, by the way. The greater question of why does it have so much wasted silicon? I don't know.
Yeah, for me, it's if you're trying to look at Intel as it's trending, no, I don't really think this matters. Its power performance matters because what they're trying to do is kind of artificial. So in a lot of ways, this win they've gotten is marketing more than anything. Or it's like, we're telling you a card is $250. People have seemingly forgotten about the whole fake MSRP thing, even though that was only 2 years ago.
It's okay if Intel lies to us, apparently.
Yeah, so they're doing the fake MSRP thing already again, or they're trying to relaunch that. Again. Yeah, that's happening again. And they made it look like this card was a competitor against the 4060, and I guess I guess that's a good marketing strategy. You made the card look really good on paper, but it's not impressive as it exists in the market. It's not impressive at almost $400, or even some models going to $400, and it's not impressive from a behind the scenes perspective because it's a it's a die that's cobbled together in a ship that isn't working, and it is way later than it should have been. Like like I said, it would have been a lot more impressive if it came out 18 months ago. That's because we're going to have cards more powerful than this at the same price point, I would bet, pretty soon or within the next 6 months at least.
Deadeyes117 writes, and it says, the release of the B580 looks to be a huge milestone for Intel's GPU division. They've actually put out a product worth buying, receiving actual recommendations from respectable reviewers. Of course, this doesn't account for the economic disaster. It surely must be behind closed doors, given the massive die compared to the competition. You've said before that you don't see them catching up with AMD or Nvidia anytime soon, which I agree with. But do you think they have been able to close the gap some due to having so much low-hanging fruit coming from the dumpster fire that was Alchemist? And so while they are still clearly way behind the competition in a lot of ways, it seems to me like they aren't quite as far behind as they used to be. Hard to disagree on the last part there. Again, I keep saying this. Again, there's going to be people that say I'm hating. Guys, I am quoting facts. They don't care about your feelings. The A770 was a card that had a die size comparable to the 3070 Ti, actually, not just the 70 Ti, and it had a superior node. Superior node, 10470 Ti die versus Intel. And what did Intel compete with? The 3060. All right, 2 years later, actually over 2 years, we have Intel that has a die comparable in size to the 4070 Ti competing with the 4060. They have not closed the gap.
No, they're. I think it's pretty easy to make the argument that they're a full generation, maybe even two behind the competition. Honestly, it's kind of funny how almost the same this is as the A770. Like,
it's just the drivers aren't as bad, but I don't know. There's still just as much forgiveness as before, which is odd to me when AMD and Nvidia's drivers have become so god dang rock solid over the past few years. Techno writes in and says, with Pac-On, is BMG G31 more or less likely to be canned? So that's the 256-bit die that's been leaked for a very long time. Also, I know this is a reference to a leak from almost 5 years ago, but is there any update on Foveros? I know Arc is dying, but if you could do Foveros with a G21-like die, it could be quite good. So he's basically asking me, is there going to be a chiplet version? I mean, I think I've reported this, actually, that originally Alchemist was supposed to use multiple chiplets put together in a similar way that I guess you would say AI Blackwell does, where it's two of the same die fused together.
mm-hmm.
And well, it was a little different though. I think there is more to it than just literally making it one monolithic thing. It was supposed to be, I guess, actually more comparable than I guess what you'd say the 250X is, or what AMD did kind of with like Epic Zen 1. But and they were supposed to do it with Battlemage, then that changed. And yeah, look, I've heard they're supposed to do it with Celestial. Like, yeah, I know. They're supposed to put multiple chips together, but they've canned it every single time so far. So we'll just have to see. Will Celestial have one low end? I forgot what it was, 128-bit die and scale up to 512-bit total. I don't know, but that was a plan. But that was a plan with Battlemage and Alchemist. And that sounds like that's going to be really tricky to get working if they still haven't.
It sounds like this is just one of their ways they keep wasting R&D money. Like, I don't know. People always ask, what are they doing with their R&D money? Maybe it's this, or not this totally, but like a bunch of fruitless designs. Like that's where their R&D money is going.
Right. And so I would suggest what they should do is, if they're not going to just can dedicated GPUs altogether, make some monolithic GPU that maybe actually can be a tile that goes on a Panther Lake successor, like something like that would be cool. And that's it. You make one monolithic die. It can be paired with a CPU chiplet if you wanted to, or sold as its own thing. And then you can add GDDR7 to it or something in the future, and stop trying to get all this other stuff going because you don't have the money if it doesn't pan out. And even if it does pan out, you're not going to make it as efficiently price-wise as AMD or Nvidia is. So just do that for years until you have the extra money to go for it again. But right now, it's like you're saying, like, look, think of how much money went into. God, it was a very old leak. Maybe it was that one that Techno referenced. I think that is the one, actually, where, and I saw it, people. I saw it. This was a very long time ago. There was a closed door showcase. I didn't see the showcase. I saw pictures and I heard about it. Behind the scenes, where I wasn't told what game they were playing, but they were running a modern AAA game like 4 or 5 years ago, and it was performing like a 2080 Ti. Well, the 2080 Ti was the gaming flagship. The problem was, I think it used 4 to 8 chiplets, and it was pulling 1,000 watts. So that must have been a lot of money to try to get that working. They never did, and that didn't go anywhere. And if they keep doing that, I can tell you they don't have the money to do it. So We'll see. So either Celestial already works, and that's why we would see a chiplet design, or I think that would be canned. And as for B31, being canned. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I think the biggest problem I have with this 256-bit die for Battlemage coming out is when it's coming out. If it came out now and it was $500 breaking even and 4070 performance, that's really not enough. Maybe if they sold it for 400, 450, I could kind of see the argument. But if this comes out after the 5070 and the 8800 XT,
yeah, it'll look stupid.
the only reason the B580 looks okay, and it's going to be for 3 weeks it looks okay, people, is because it's competing with a 4-year-old 3060.
Yeah, it will look good until CES in January.
Which is in 3 weeks.
Yeah.
So Techno writes in again, says, this is an interesting link. If you jump to the future of ARC section with Tom Peterson, he heavily hints in an interview that they're going to be effectively focusing solely on APUs in the next few years. Once the discrete cards have improved the drivers enough, he wasn't selling the idea that ARC will still be around in 10 years at all. Yeah, like, what do you want me to say? People are clipping what they want to hear and what they want to share. Like, see, they're going to keep developing it. And then they're not clipping the portion where he says, but the focus is APUs now. He just said it's done.
Oh, yeah.
He just said it's done.
I mean, I can foresee like the ARC lasting a long time as like what it is now, where every couple of years a discrete design comes out, because
$200 thing, and they use that for driver development, and then they have APUs. Sure,
yeah, but
that's not what Intel told you. Again, when I said ARC's effectively canceled, I'm talking about the roadmap that is provably wrong. I'm provably right about this now. There is no ultra enthusiast card in 2024. It's over. The roadmap's gone. It is gone. It didn't happen.
Yeah, I know. It's funny how much shit that video has. I mean, it's a successful video too, but
yeah, it's gained us tens of thousands of subscribers and still gains them this week, people.
It is funny, like if you actually just read the content of the video or look at the contents of that video, it's one Battlemage die might come out. Oh,
one or two might come out, and the point is this roadmap isn't happening.
Yeah.
All right. Well, something that is happening, though, is an ad from Micro Center. Micro Center is having a holiday savings event right now. Not really sure how much more you can save, considering every time I check Micro Center, their prices are absolutely hilarious. But there's a link in the description to see their best deals. They're also doing a deal on the Microsoft Surface products. Link is there as well. They're opening a new location in Santa Clara. And again, if you sign up for that, you'll get, I believe, a free flash drive as always. And additionally, they are now, they have flight sim bundles and racing bundles as well. I mean, I just always like to check. This is kind of like the bi-weekly check-in with me and you on Micro Center to see like what the craziest deal is. I guess the thing I would want to know is like, yeah, it's in stock, the 9800X 3D. Dozens of them in stock at the location I'm looking at here, and it's $480 at MSRP. So if you want the 9800X 3D, it is in stock. It is at MSRP. And if you want to save some money, they have the 7600X 3D for $300 with 32 gigabytes of RAM for free. Honestly, if I couldn't get that because I need more cores for my work, but if I was a gamer, I'd probably just get the 7600X 3D with 32 gigabytes of RAM.
One of the best gaming CPUs out there still.
Yeah, I mean, like what? You're going to lose 20, 30% performance at most and still have all this RAM. Then just upgrade to Zen 6 on AM5. Like, what's going to be bottlenecked? So, I don't know. The best deals are at Micro Center this holiday season, I got to say, or at least some of the best deals are. And check out those links in the description to support us. And yeah, this piece of content was sponsored by Micro Center, and I'm glad that it was, because what a fun sponsor to actually have. Okay, let us now then move on to story number 4. Intel's latest Arrow Lake firmware reportedly offers little to no performance gains. Here we go. Quoting first from Guru 3D, tests by users with an ASRock Z890 Tachi OCF motherboard indicate that Intel's latest firmware update for the Arrow Lake CPU series provides only a minor performance improvement. The firmware, known as microcode 0x114, with the Core Ultra 200S processors, aims to fix existing performance issues with Arrow Lake and its architecture. But despite the patch being available, motherboard manufacturers are not officially supporting it as of now, or at least of this recording, and it has not been added to any partner support pages. Arrow Lake processors currently face significant issues because of the latency between dies. And so, yeah, people have to remember that on November 8th, there was a live stream on Hot Hardware. Robert Halleck promised fixes for Arrow Lake to come in November or by the latest December. And one fix did seemingly come. However, there's no official support for it as of now. For motherboards, there's no proper testing. Users on forums have tried to do beta forced BIOSes with the fix, and results are mixed. The best post was someone claiming a 3% performance improvement in Cyberpunk with a 10% power reduction. Meanwhile, I think people have been conflating this with another report from PC Games, and quoting here, gaming is looking like a much better prospect for Intel Arrow Lake CPUs thanks to the latest Cyberpunk 2077 update. Notice that the patch notes stated that the game is around 33% faster on Arrow Lake chips. This person, PC Games N, said they decided to try it out for themselves with an Ultra 7265K, and the results were transformative. It made it a genuine competitor to AMD's gaming CPUs. But where did those results come from? A CD Projekt Red patch for the game that was clearly having issues. And look, Zen 5 had tons of issues at launch and games were patched. I don't remember if it was Cyberpunk. That may have been one of them or which one it was. I remember Zen 5 getting like a 30% performance regression to Zen 4 in a game. Again, stupid, AMD screwed up there. But the game was patched for a lot of those, not always AMD. And so all we can say is Robert Halleck promised performance fixes. They're not officially out yet. They seem to be 3% at best. And so far, the greatest gains are when a dev sits down and basically does their best to optimize for it. Not every dev's going to do that, but hey, at least on average, it might be getting above Raptor Lake performance.
Ooh, well, that's something. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know how much you had to say about this one. I think we have to keep tabs with this, though, just like we had to keep tabs with Zen 5, because look, it was a horrible launch, both Zen 5's launch and Arrow Lake. And there were a lot of promises made by both AMD and Intel. Some of them have been fulfilled by AMD. I'd still argue they misportrayed the gaming performance no matter how you dice it.
They did.
Big time, yeah. But Robert Halleck's going on live stream saying, hey, we're going to fix this. Okay, well, you said November or December at the latest. Where is it?
Yeah, and that's why
we must trust what Tom Peterson says or something. Guys, here's another promise. It didn't happen.
Yeah, and that's why I say, like, the expectation a lot of people have that, like, well, the B580's performance bugs will go away over time. And yeah, I'm sure some of them will.
Maybe.
Like some games, I'm sure a patch will be put out or a driver helps it. But, one of those drivers, I think, actually hurt performance in some games. So it's stuff like this why I say, well, why would you expect that? They promised performance fixes for Arrow Lake, and this is what we get. No official support, 3% better performance, and the devs fixing the performance in their game, one of their games.
Spending the time to optimize, not to the metal, but really go for it.
Like, it's a completely broken promise already. 3% performance, that's not what they were trying to imply by performance fixes.
Mm-hmm. So Intel promised fixes by December at the latest. They haven't happened. We'll keep tabs on this, though, because I think it is worth watching how well Arrow Lake ages. Because, again, people are just like, oh, fine wine. I always hated this about AMD, too. Oh, AMD will have fine wine. Not always. Not all. The Fury didn't age like fine wine at all. Like, we can't always assume that things will age better. It's great when they do. Zen 4, Zen 5 certainly did. I actually don't think Pascal aged badly. I'd push back on that. Polaris aged great. Sure, whatever. Yeah. But they don't always age greatly.
And again, we say this every time with the fine wine thing. Fixing your drivers shouldn't be considered fine wine.
It should be. That's what it should have been at launch.
Yes, like, oh, yes, I've removed the cork from your wine. It aged like fine wine.
Yeah, it's a funny way to put it. All right. Let us now move on to story number 5. AMD Krackan point leaked in Geekbench. Quoting here from Video Cards. The SFG 1661 Swift laptop from Acer has been tested on Geekbench 6.3 CPU benchmark. The Krackan point APU scored 2,677 points in the single-threaded test and 11,742 points in the multi-core workload. The score places it higher than the 8845HS in multi-threading performance and 8-core Hawkpoint APU with a 45-watt TDP, according to official rankings. I was going to say, because I did a lot of testing of Hawkpoint and looking at the stuff with leaks.
Is that the one you have?
Yeah, that when I saw that score reading this, I'm like, oh, so yeah, it's better than Hawkpoint CPU. So yep, Krackan point has showed up in Geekbench results databases. The configuration results do seem credible, especially after Geekbench AI results from a 3+3 Krackan configuration surface last month. The test is for the full 4.4 full 4 plus 4 configuration this time, and shows similar performance to a 45-watt Hawkpoint and only a 5% behind Strix point in single threading and 20% in multi-threading. Yeah, that's impressive. Crucially, we do not know the TDP of the Krackan engineering sample tested, though. But what we do know is that Krackan is being tested at laptop OEMs and should be ready for launch early next year. So what do you think about this, Dan?
I mean, it looks... Krackan point, I don't recall. That's Hawkpoint replacement, or is that low end?
Well, this is one of the many premium APUs, as they're all premium or extra premium,
so
unless you get
third,
bronze.
It's the third tier premium.
Right, because, well, I think I actually have this slide handy in preparation. Let's see here. What did I leak? This is becoming an old leak by now, but yes, they called Halo the Elite Experience, Strix Point Premium, Krackan Premium, and then Escher and Rembrandt were mainstream. Now, there's no budget. Mendocino is every day.
Okay.
Nothing is budgeted at AMD.
Well, nothing.
Your 4 Zen 2 cores are everyday usage, not budget.
Makes me think of the Tim and Eric sketch. I've got the best prices.
I got the best prices sketch, yeah. But yeah, so I mean, you would say this is basically the same tier Hawkpoint's in now, but there's probably going to be some die shrunk or budgeted version of Hawkpoint that will be called Escher.
Oh, yeah.
Probably next year too. So if you say is this replacing Hawkpoint in the tier in the lineup where it is now, which it really is right now, about to be Strix Halo, Strix Point, then Hawkpoint is budget, and then Rembrandt is ultra budget. Krackan will be mid-range.
Okay. I mean, so it's an iteration off of Hawkpoint. I would expect it to perform.
Well, iteration.
It's a replacement. Yeah, size iteration's the wrong word.
In that tier.
Yes. I mean, that's what you expect, right? Like, it looks like it has promising performance. I'm not sure how much more there is to say about it, though.
Yeah. I think what's interesting is that the CCD for Zen 5 is actually slightly smaller than Zen 4. And so if you think about it, that was on desktop with 8 big versus 8 big cores. Zen 5 is actually smaller than Zen 4. Now we're going from 8 big to 4 little 4 big, and Zen 5 is naturally smaller. So they're going to save a decent chunk on die space for the CPU portion of this APU compared to Hawkpoint, while apparently having the same performance or a little higher, which is what I always thought they were going for with Krackan. Now, the rumors are, of course, that it has 8 compute units. And I've seen some consternation online. Oh, why only 8? But
it's good enough for I mean, that could still be a pretty good handheld, I would think.
I think it'd be a very good handheld. Hear me out, people. Strix Point seems to have issues with having enough bandwidth. With 16 CUs and even 12 CUs seems a little bandwidth constrained in a lot of scenarios. So, Strix uses DDR5 7500. I'm starting to see them come out with 8000 now, by the way. All right, well, they know that this is probably going to be paired with 6400, 6000, 5600. And if 7500, 8000 is still sometimes bottlenecking the cut down 12 CU version of Strix, I think AMD goes, honestly, this might only be 20% weaker, and it's probably going to... I wouldn't be surprised if it traded blows with Hawkpoint in integrated graphics performance. I really wouldn't be surprised by that. And from that perspective, 33% smaller GPU, a CPU that's probably like half as big. I don't know what die size this will exactly be, but I believe Hawkpoint was 178 millimeters squared. Wouldn't be surprised if this is 150, 140. I think this could easily go into $700, $800 laptops and give you better performance and a modern MPU. I guess it might actually be 150 or higher because now they have the MPU a little bigger than with Hawkpoint. I should account for that. But again, I think this is going to be something where when you see these Hawkpoint laptops going for like 600, 700, this will be better than them and fit in the same price range.
Well, yeah, this will be good. And I don't think they have that. I don't think they brand it as this anymore, but like Asus's Zen books, I could see it going well and like something like that. And it's also just going to be paired with a GPU a lot of the time, I assume. So
right. Right. I mean, think about that. Like this will be paired probably with this is the APU that I would want to see paired with 5060s.
Yeah.
For like $1,000, $1,200, instead of having more cores than you need, more integrated graphics than you need when you're bundling it. I think, yeah.
Yeah.
Techno writes in, will Krackan have a Zen 6 successor? Will it be monolithic? So I don't know for a fact on this one, but my guess, and it is a guess, is that AMD, I've already leaked that it seems like Medusa Point has a 12-core CCD. Presumably that will be shared with Medusa Halo. That would get 2 of them, and Medusa Range or whatever they call that, and then Medusa Ridge for desktop. All right, so 12 cores though seems like more than what this needs. So I would suspect that whatever the Zen 6 successor to Krackan is, probably is monolithic, probably is still 4+4, or who knows, maybe 4+6 with 10 compute units or something. And once you're below like 180 millimeters squared, it should probably just be monolithic. It's just going to be cheaper and easier, which is not the case with Medusa Point. That seems to have I think I'm trying to remember what it was. I leaked it. Well, if I leaked it, then Tom, why don't you open this slide? A 75 millimeter squared CCD, a 200 millimeter squared IO die. So that's 20% bigger than Strix Point. That makes sense to use chiplets now. We're getting right to where you would want to use chiplets. Yeah, I would assume it's probably going to be monolithic. Now, the only crazy thing I've heard, and Carrie Nosagata, contributor to Moore's Law, said proposed this is, what if to get AI tops to where they're supposed to be on desktop with Zen 6 chips, what if they just don't have an NPU and they just clock 10 compute units to like 3.1 gigahertz? And then for Krackan successor, they just use the same IO die they're using on desktop. It's a 128-bit, just use 2 DDR5s to be... that's the only situation where I could see that happening, where they pair like a 75 millimeter squared Zen 6 CCD. It has more cores than you need, but whatever, they'll probably be disabled. And they just pair that with like a 120 millimeter squared IO die with 10 compute units or something. But I would still guess that's not going to happen. It's going to be monolithic.
Or hear me out. All NPUs. They completely get rid of their graphics and CPU architectures, and they just make it run completely by AI.
There's been some stagnated, always wrong leakers that have theorized, by the way, online, that NPUs will just replace GPUs and will use an algorithm to guess what the game works. Don't see that happening anytime soon. But joking aside, we have to be careful, Dan. Someone, seems to think that would happen.
I love the idea of playing a video game or typing something, and it's like
just dolly pictures everywhere.
I'm pretty sure he meant to type an A there, even though I pressed the space bar.
Yes, we want neural engines guessing what words I'm typing, even though I can type it, guys. Story number 6. Valve may be ready to revive Steam machines with Project Fremont, and Lenovo SteamOS handhelds have been leaked. So quoting here from TechSpot, Valve's new logo, powered by SteamOS brand guidelines, reference other devices, suggesting that the Steam Deck may no longer be the only hardware running Valve's custom Linux distro. Including the OS to other PCs could loosen Microsoft's grip on PC gaming. A recent Steam Deck kernel update referenced a device codenamed Fremont as well that features an HDMI port connected directly to a graphics chip. Although hardware details are scarce, the leak indicates that Valve is likely developing a machine that runs SteamOS and connects to an external display. Together with information from leaker and friend of the show, Bradley Lynch from Sadly is Bradley, the kernel patch describes a standard size HDMI port that links, without going through USB as well. Again, suggesting that this is a standalone TV box because it's not going through USB and it's not a Steam Deck dock. And isn't this a neat combo? But yeah, so I don't know. I think that's really interesting. We also see Lenovo is probably launching a SteamOS thing. So more devices will be running SteamOS. And there is a lot of evidence out there that they are working on a competitor to the Xbox Series S, and something that could maybe bring competition to PC gaming OSs.
I'm always excited when with the developments in SteamOS. It seems to be chugging along really well. And when they first announced it, they said other devices can use it. So I think this was bound to happen at some point. But I'm excited to see like more handhelds, more just boxes that you plug in and you get a new Steam box. I think now is a perfect time for it, as I feel Microsoft is annoying a lot of people right now with Windows. And
I was shocked that Daniel Nenny even had a rant about it, in addition to, of course, Windle. And I mean, it's pretty universal, the ire towards Microsoft right now.
Yeah, and I think without Xbox being a strong competitor to the PS5, just an open market with SteamOS, and who knows, maybe actually making a powerful Steam box, maybe some company will make a powerful Steam box at some point. That puts some pressure on Sony that wasn't there before, I think.
Right, again, and this is an analogy
Microsoft, obviously.
This is an analogy I keep making. Like, and people are like, well, if Microsoft stops making Xboxes, which, it sounds like they're making another generation, but if they were to stop, then Sony would go mad with power. Maybe, but it would only be to their own detriment, because if there was GM and just Ford, and Ford goes out of business, then you would go, oh, well, now they're going to charge $100,000 for a Chevy Cruze that should be 25, 30 grand. They could do that, but I bet more people ride scooters, motorcycles, take the bus, and then some company will make a pseudo car that's like a motor. Like, those are very popular in Europe.
Yeah.
Like these 3-wheeled motorcycles that they put a car chassis over, basically. If you try to charge too much, these things are indirectly in competition and eventually feels like direct competition. If all Valve does is make it super easy to make a cheaper $500 PC that's close to PlayStation's price performance, then Sony can't get away with $700 for it. So I really welcome this.
Yeah, I know. Same. I'm excited to see more SteamOS products, or powered by SteamOS computers coming out.
All right, now let us move on to story number 7. Nintendo Switch allegedly pictured basically all over the place. Quoting from WCCF Tech, these new pictures show in a new video shared on Bilibili by user something 68, sorry, can't read Chinese characters, highlight some of the differences with the current Joy-Con controller, which don't look major at first glance. Without an official announcement, however, it is difficult to say what some of the changes over the original controller are, such as the additional buttons and what they could be used for. Meanwhile, D-Brand has seemingly also leaked that the Switch 2 looks like within one of their upcoming products. They showed 3D renders of some new product for an upcoming Nintendo device, and they, I believe, openly confirmed, is based on what it really looks like. And at the same time, there are now people sharing what are allegedly renders of what this Switch 2 will look like as well. And so I don't know what else there is to really say. The Switch 2, or I would hope it would be called Super Switch, seems to change very little from the base Switch fundamentally, at least at first glance. There are a lot of glances that we're taking first at here. That we're
taking first looks at.
We're taking a lot of first glances here at this thing, it seems, lately. And it obviously, because of that, is launching soon. It also has 1536 CUDA cores in the full APU, 12 gigabytes of RAM is leaked by this channel. None of that really changes. So the only question I seem to have after all of these leaks is if this thing really will have some way of enhancing the cooling radically while docked to boost to higher clock speeds, like I've suspected and kind of been told it will do by someone at Nvidia. Well, it's on the go. So again, I don't know how much we have to say about this, but this is pretty big news. This thing's about to be announced.
Yeah, there's something going on at Nintendo. I don't know if what the source of all these leaks are, but Nintendo seems to be a bit leakier than usual when it comes to the Switch too. And
whenever that happens with a company that usually doesn't have a lot of leaks, that usually means it's about to be announced.
Oh yeah, it should have been announced a long time ago. But it looks basically the same to me as a person that hasn't spent much time using a Switch, to be fair. But it doesn't look like they're changing that much about the form factor, which I think is smart. The only thing I could imagine is if it looks too similar, it might be confusing branding or difficult branding.
Well, that's why I think it'd be smart to call it the Super Switch, just because there's lineage there, the Super NES and stuff. And also, you obviously know what it is. Like, it's a Switch, but it's just way better. It's super. Whereas Switch 2, I don't know, they never seem to do the numbering thing, so I kind of doubt that on its own. And I just think there's something about the Switch where people don't want the nonsense, don't care that it's not the highest performance, and just want to get it and know it's going to play all their Nintendo games. And I do think if you had a Switch 2, people would worry, oh, is there backwards compatibility? Yeah. What's the difference? Super Switch is like, it's the same thing but better, which is a smart move in a world where the Switch keeps selling, I think.
Or hear me out, Tom. Switch U.
That really worked out before. Yeah. God, what a bizarre U. I mean, what does that mean? It doesn't mean to make it sound better. No, we don't need to get back into the Wii U. What an insane decision that was. I mean, honestly, Wii X would have sounded better because everyone assumes X means better. But all right, let us now move on then to the wrap up. This is the final stories that we didn't think deserved a huge discussion, but deserve being mentioned. So, I mean, I think we reported this a couple weeks ago or more, where AMD fixed the intercore latency for desktop Zen 5, you know, between the two CCDs and the IO die. Even though it was monolithic, Strix point was it had horrific latency between the big and the little core clusters. It seems like there's at least a 50% reduction in latency there as well. So I don't know that I have much to say, but the Zen 5 fixes continue to come. Though what's interesting is a lot of games just doesn't matter because they were just reusing the 4 big cores anyways. They didn't need anything else. But I think long term that'll make a difference. Lisa Su has been named CEO of the year. I don't have much to say about that except what a week for that to happen as Pat Gelsinger gets fired. I've seen a lot of comparisons there.
Well, if you're looking at the stock success of a company, it's a pretty good race between AMD and Nvidia for who you grade as the best CEO or CEO of the year. So I think it's well earned for her.
Yeah. Also, Intel co-CEO dampens expectations for first-gen Falcon Shores AI GPU. This is the quote. Is it going to be wonderful? No, but it's a good first step.
Ooh, that's not a promising.
And again, like they need the money from AI. They're not going to make it in GPU. And it's like, well, I hope they keep. What if we made the thing that actually needs to succeed be good? Maybe that's what they should be spending money on, not spending money on stuff to make your RDNA 4 cards cheaper.
Oh, that's a good idea. I never thought of that. make things that make money.
Meanwhile, Intel has claimed that there are high return rates for Qualcomm's laptops. Qualcomm has responded. The X Elite has normal return rates. I can say there are.
There are high
I've been told by people at Micro Center, Best Buy, and other retailers too that I speak with that there are much higher than average return rates with the X Elite laptops, that people get them, find out half of their apps don't work, and then demand a refund.
I mean, I could imagine a more low information person that just goes into Best Buy getting a laptop. Like, wait, so this just doesn't support a bunch of apps for some reason? I don't know.
And then maybe the rep, and a lot of reps, the reps I've talked to at Best Buy often will be honest and be like, well, it might have trouble with some things. I wouldn't recommend this for gaming. But if a rep was to be on the more pushy side and go, well, it's not for gaming, but it generally works, and then they buy it and they're going to come back mad. You said this generally works. So what are you talking about? So no, I'm hearing that is true. Also, there was a prototype, I believe it was just a prototype shown off of an A770 low profile 16 gigabyte card. Now, obviously, I don't recommend Alchemist, but I do want to say this again. I really do think that there's no reason we couldn't have low profile cards all the way up to at least the 70 class. And if they can fit a 400 millimeter squared 16 gigabyte card into a low profile form factor, for sure we could probably go up to maybe a 4080 70 Ti Super. And I would make that trade if I just knew every 2 years there was going to be a $700 card that's this big. I would get a much smaller desktop PC.
Or what if instead we made GPUs 18 inches long now? As opposed to
cool 300 watts with the 4080. I don't know. That's
because I can't remember exactly how big my GPU is, but it's I think it's like 14 inches long or something. It's a bit of a behemoth.
Yeah. And final one here, game publishers are scared of GTA 6. I think this is a story talking about how publishers are kind of refusing to say exactly when their games launch next year because they want to know when GTA 6 does before they announce their release date.
Well, and it was funny in the article, they talked about how Rockstar is pretty well known for their delays. So it would be very funny if they're like, comes out in November, everyone's like, phew, we'll release in March of next year. And then they're like, no, it comes out in March. That happens with Rockstar a lot. But I get why they're scared. There are studios that whenever a game comes out, it feels like an event. And I think Rockstar...
This is probably the number one.
I think Rockstar's the biggest of them.
It is. The only other ones that come to mind is, I guess at this point, if there was an Elden Ring 2, and I guess they announced that co-op game, that could be considered one. Elden Ring felt like an event. My God, everyone was playing it and talking about it online. Certainly Naughty Dog games tend to be an event. Call of Duties can be. But yeah, number one's GTA. That's a big deal whenever they announce that. Or Red Dead Redemption as well, of course, which is really in the same vein. All right. Let us now get to the, let's see here. All right. Techno writes in and says, with 1440p monitors being the price of 1080p monitors from just a few years ago, and 4K 144 hertz monitors being cheaper than 1440p 144 were just in 2020, why haven't we seen mainstream 8K 144 hertz monitors yet? Because usually when a resolution becomes cheaper, it just means a newer resolution comes out at the old price point. Well, number one, I think there's a worry how many people have the right output to support the bandwidth for 8K
Does
144 hertz.
can the latest HDMI
I think
standard
you
do
would need
that?
Lovelace or later. Yeah, I think the new
It
AMD
does.
ones.
Okay.
I could be wrong. Someone might correct me right now because I know it's, well, let's see. Here's where I'm getting to. It kind of seems like to even get to 120 hertz with 8K, maybe like these, I don't even know if the 7900 XTX can, because I don't think it's the full implementation of DisplayPort 2.1. So to answer your question, it's because almost no cards are going to do that frame rate. First of all, like only the very latest, and how many of those people that even have that card want 8K instead of 4K? So I think that's actually your answer. That's your answer, Techno. I don't think it's as simple as no one wants 8K. I think there's a real business case to be made that there isn't a market yet that can use it. And it's not because they can't drive 8K 60. It's just if you're going to go above 60, very few cables and graphics cards can actually support that.
Yeah, and no, I don't think there's a market for 8K 60. I think I think most of the people that would want to get an 8K monitor would want to be able to push like 120 hertz at least. Not that I think there's any graphics card that can really do that yet, to be like that can send that much data to begin with, but the market's not there, and I do think a big part of it though still is the fact that I think there's going to be fewer and fewer people that want to adopt 8K. I mean, we see it with 4K. We see it with 1440p. I mean, most people seem to be satisfied with 1080p, and I think a lot of people that are on 4K are forever satisfied with 4K.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think even people at 4K before they go to 8K, they just say, "Wow, a lot of A's there in that sentence." Why don't you just give me a card strong enough so instead of doing DLSS balanced mode, I go to DLSS ultra quality, or even turn on the version of DLSS that actually raises image quality from a higher resolution to 4K before they'd go. I mean, I'm not going to 8K until it's brutal easy. Now, the thing is once all cards easily do 8K 144, it is worth pointing out, though, that DLSS in balanced mode would look way better in 8K,
True,
relatively speaking, than 4K. So there's an argument to be made to go there, but we're just not there yet. We're just not. I mean, that's really what it comes down to is I don't think manufacturers want a repeat of what happened when 4K first came out, where I don't remember, you had one of the first 4K monitors in like 2013 that you managed to get a Samsung one for $600. And I don't even remember, could your graphics card even do 4K 60 yet until you upgraded it?
No, when I'm trying to remember the first card I had that.
It's 7950.
No, I was the 7950 definitely couldn't do 4K. Could do 1440p decently well though.
Yeah.
And then what was my next card? The 390 I think did okay. Sometimes you could get it to almost do 4K, but that was mostly a 1440p
and then
card.
I believe had the right display port to be able to do it.
Yeah, then if I'm remembering correctly, next was Vega. Vega could do 4K. Okay, no one would
4K 60 though,
and no one would
high settings.
And by today's standards, no one would say that's a 4K card.
We used to put up with an average of 60 with drops to 50. Everyone wants locked 60 now.
Yeah, so I mean, it's been there for a while that you could, if you were willing to lower a lot of settings, you could get to a playable 4K. But yeah, I think it's going to take a long time for 8K to become to be where 4K is now. I think that's at least 10 years.
Yeah, I agree with that. All right, final reader mail. Dead AI writes in and says, maybe the ultra enthusiasts are just the friends we make along the way.
I think that's a nice sentiment.
I think maybe that was the ultra enthusiast Intel GPU we were looking for all along.
Friendship.
The friends in the journey. On that note, I think is a fun way to end this episode. I actually have to get going to start recording more content for the channel for over the break. So
always be contenting, Tom.
Always be contenting is what they always say. But thank you to everyone for listening and watching this episode. Remember to like, subscribe, share. And by subscribe, definitely make sure you're subscribed to the Moore's Law is Dead YouTube channel. That helps so much. And ring the bell button. And of course, support us on Patreon, where you can ask guest questions for free. If you were a member, you were able to ask David questions, and you'll be able to ask questions of me and Dan for an episode coming out over Christmas time as we look at the products dropping in 2025. If you want to be part of that, lowest tier gets access to that, as well as the Discord, and of course Die Shrinks. That there's hundreds of them without ads too for you if you want that extra content as well. Or again, most importantly, just to support us, because we can't do this without our patrons. Any final words, Dan?
Well, I don't know if you noticed this, but it was a pretty monumental occasion. The first time my dog has barked while we were recording an episode.
Which leave it in, Gerard. Dan muting himself and being like,
I said, stop, Wendy, which Wendy is my dog's name.
Yeah. So, well, there we go. There's a first time for a lot of firsts this month. Another fun one to report on Broken Silicon. But all right. Thank you for watching and listening, everybody. Have a good week.
Bye.
This podcast was brought to you by the YouTube channel and website Moore's Law is Dead. Moore's Law is Dead and Broken Silicon are trademarks of their creator, Tom. That guy is me, and I am indeed the creator, editor, writer, and showrunner of Moore's Law is Dead podcasts, videos, articles, and other media. However, it's not just me. Moore's Law is Dead is a team, with Broken Silicon co-hosted by my brother Dan, audio editing by Gerard Cortez, renders being done by the industrial designer Jean-Philippe Clermont, and special assistance is also provided by Carmen Cry and Carrie Nosugada as well. Find all of our information at www.mooreslawsdead.com on the About/Support page. In the event you do want to hire me for consulting work, hire Gerard for audio work, hire Jean-Philippe for industrial design work, or you're interested in working with Carbon Cry or Carrie Nosugada as well. You can also find our long-term sponsors on that page if you want to show them some love for putting food on our tables. Or you can also mail us some love. You can send letters or hardware donations to the following address: Moore's Law is Dead, P.O. Box 60632 in Nashville, Tennessee, zip code 37206. Although, to be honest, the best way to show Moore's Law is Dead some love is to support us on Patreon. Patrons are what makes Moore's Law is Dead content truly possible. Every month, and really every day, depending on who you're talking about, me, Gerard, Dan, and Jean-Philippe are working tirelessly to provide a steady stream of content that we could not keep doing unless we knew the work was possible without being reliant on sponsors dictating every little thing we put out. Don't get us wrong. We love our sponsors, but we love directly working for you, our fans, much more. If you have any extra money, even a couple free dollars a month, consider supporting us directly on Patreon. Those couple of monthly dollars will get you access to the exclusive podcast Die Shrink, voting on subjects of future podcast episodes, the ability to ask guest questions, and of course, access to the Moore's Law is Dead Discord full of like-minded people who I am sure would love to meet you. I am one of them. Additionally, higher tiers get access to early, ad-free episodes of Broken Silicon, the ability to ask questions in all Broken Silicon episodes and Loose Ends live streams ahead of the recording, and the entire back catalog of Moore's Law is Dead podcasts, in addition to having thanks in the credits of videos and podcasts depending on the tier, with other perks available as well. And hey, if you cannot afford to support us directly every month, please do share Moore's Law is Dead videos and podcasts with friends and family, and on social media and websites like Reddit. And give Broken Silicon a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or your preferred podcast app of choice. All of this does really help us so much. But like I said, this podcast would not be possible without the patrons directly providing predictable and reliable support every month. And so now it is time to give a personal thanks to the greatest of the fans. The following supporters are at the 10 gigahertz or higher supported levels: Brad Medlin, Drita Foles, Z Jits, Daniel D, Deke, Nicholas Buckner, Aaron Close, Jan Rauner, Daniel Hyde, GC Ziggy, MJB1, SNES Chalmers, Jem Ferriero, Toka, Falcon Malev, Jensen Wang, Gregorius Acker, Sarcastro, Chris Rich, Evan Dingle, Compressed AI Blocks, Halbuma, Shredbird, Holden Mobley, Sammy Malas, Jordan Simkovic, Julian Leak, The Boss Haas, Jonathan, Chrysantine, Franco Frederic, Jake223, Jake Martin, Slicky, Nithra Zink, Meat and Pork, Tim Robb, Ian Clifford, Travis Gooding, Mad, Zoot Taylor, Stephen Coates, Greg, Michael McGee, Patty Cakes, Gamers Unite, Amiable Chief, Mark Mitchell, Tommy, Jamie Witters, I Should, Mark Raidmaker, James Anderson, Cole Addict, Cameron, Henry Zhang, Wesley Sager, Michelle Pell, Hexapuma, Mai Sharona, Reginald Ari, Tika Autumn, Win Wang, Winstar, Corey Leonard, James I. Raider, Little Germany, GSMMH, Shay, Milton, Melodic Warrior, Brett Jones, Chuck Glidden, Mac Taffy, Stephen Dick, Dave Schultz, Austin Haggerty, Justin Bustle, Jofet, Brian Scanlon, Hardland, Jansen, Angima, Joseph Kelly, Sleshba, Him, Sagung, Tails, 2299, Meal Valverga, Sisyphos 7771, The Forbidden Juice, Brian Wright, RB Racer, Alex Vega, Dr. J Mad, Free D, Michael Cozy, John Swin, Crystal Joe, Elbergun, Jeffrey, Jeneman, Kikum, Solarize 80, Matthew Marlowe, Brian P, Sprutnik, Whodat42, Figuk, Heguk, Cornster 671, Penta Wenta, Hal, Richard, Omega Doge, Angel of Cake, Mr. Tiger, John Wick Boomstick, Porcelain Olds, Curry King, Nick Zuzmania, Sakosha, State Farm Steak, Armand Vacatura, Rai Hill Chi Bowles, and Kevin Kuntz. And of course, thank you to Sahara for the music, and have a great holiday season, everybody.